There's a monster outside, and it's watching us. This is the No Fear podcast. We know what scares you.
I'm Matt.
I'm Mel,
And I'm Lisa.
and this is the No Fear Cast, the podcast where we dissect horror and all the things that scare us. This is episode 21 of season 6, and we are stalking the waters of our series, The Summer of Sharks. That's right, we all know Jaws, but this summer, we're going bigger, toothier, and downright absurd. Forget Sharknado, we've got the weirdest shark horror movies right here all summer. So far, we've faced the sharks of the corn and Sharktopus, and we revisited Jaws. This shark doesn't need 2 or even 6 heads to be bad news. Are you ready for the Meg?
All right. Well, as Mel said in the introduction, this episode we decided to pick something that was maybe a little bit higher caliber, although I guess higher caliber is kind of a fluid term. But we decided to go for something that definitely has a much bigger budget than most of the other shark movies that we have been watching so far with the Summer of Sharks. And we are watching and discussing the 2018 Jason Statham summer blockbuster vehicle, The Meg. And it, again, like I said, came out in 2018. It's directed by John Turteltaub. It's got Jason Statham, Rainn Wilson, and those are probably the biggest named stars that you would recognize. But there was also Bing Bing Lee, who was played Su Yin, and Winston Chow and Cliff Curtis were some of the other uh, fairly high named actors in the movie. For those of you that are not familiar with The Meg, it's it's a misleading title, I think, because if you just say to someone, "Hey, I'm going to watch The Meg this weekend," and they're not familiar with the movie already, it's going to sound like a person's name, like short for Megan or something. But it is not actually short for a person's name. It is short for the word megalodon, as in gigantic prehistoric 75-foot long shark. And I will do my best at a plot summary here, but I don't know really how to describe this movie because as I said to Mel and Lisa as we were discussing this before we hit record, that the movie feels like it has three very distinct acts in the movie, and there's three very distinct parts to it. But basically, Rainn Wilson is a billionaire, and he has funded this underwater laboratory. And we come to find out that there is a theory by this Professor Zhang that the bottom of the Marianas Trench is not actually the bottom, that it's actually I believe the word they use is thermocline, sort of a cloud like thing, but that is so cold that it prevents any life from crossing it, both from below or above. And so they send a vessel down to test this theory. Turns out that he is correct. The vessel goes through this thermocline and encounters a whole ecosystem of previously unencountered life, at least by humans, one of which turns out to be a very large, very massive shark that is drawn to the lights that they disperse. They end up getting shipwrecked. That's when Jason Statham gets called in, who is an undersea diver, a rescue diver. And there's lots more to say here, but he gets called in to help rescue them. And suffice to say, after the rescue, the shark comes back with them and causes lots of sharky terror. And I think that's probably the best way to give an overall summation of the movie. We can probably get more detailed on plot points as we dive into the movie and whatnot. So, just to give kind of my initial impressions, surprisingly, I had not seen this movie before until we decided to watch it for this podcast. So, up until just roughly a few days ago, actually. it was on my radar. I had some friends that went and saw it in the theater when it came out, and I wanted to go see it with them. I don't remember the reason why. It's kind of hard to remember why I wasn't able to see a movie in the theater 4 years ago. But suffice to say, I was not able to join them and just never got around to watching it after then. But this is definitely a summer blockbuster type movie. You've got Jason Statham, you've got the big budget for special effects and casting and all of those sorts of things. So it very much feels like akin to something like Pacific Rim or even Armageddon or movies of that nature, very big tentpole summer action movies. And I mean, I really liked it. It's got no illusions about being high art, and if you don't go in there expecting high art, you're not going to be disappointed. And maybe it's also that some of the other movies we have watched this summer have been such lower quality in terms of acting, in terms of writing, in terms of special effects. Maybe this just exceeded that bar. But either way, I really enjoyed it. It's not to say it's a perfect movie. I definitely have some quibbles with it, but yeah, I mean, it's a fun popcorn summer action movie with a 75-foot long shark and people getting eaten. So Mel, Lisa, I'll turn it over to one of you to kind of jump in and give some of your impressions.
I'm gonna like agree with or repeat a little bit of what you said, Matt. This is a movie that surprisingly I didn't see in theaters. I don't remember why. And then yeah, I didn't watch it afterwards. So I was aware of it. I knew that it was adapted from a novel, which apparently there's a book series now, which we'll probably talk about that and its implications for the movies when we get further on. But I had never seen it. I'm not even sure I saw parts of this on TV, as I usually get movies, strangely enough. So yeah, this was my first watching of the movie. It was, I guess, I went in cold. I didn't really know much of anything about the plot other than Megalodon and Jason Statham action movie hero type. And yeah, I thought it was a great popcorn summer blockbuster. I think it would have been cool to see it in the theater. I'll watch it again. I enjoyed it. After the movies that we've been watching this summer, I was probably almost overly impressed, but it struck me as just a fun kind of almost like monster movie. And I do like these weird pseudoscientific idea shows of, oh, what if there's like this spot in the ocean or this spot on some continent where there's still prehistoric animals alive, and what would that mean? I mean, I am a Godzilla fan after all, so this was right up my alley in that way too. But yeah, I thought it was fun. There were some surprises in it for me, which that kind of surprised me. I kind of felt like this was a movie that I might be able to kind of predict things because I watched Jaws, and then we watched all these other shark movies. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and I would watch it again. And it definitely brought the action, which was something I think we talked about a little bit before we hit record. And I'm sure we'll talk about as we go through the episode. Lisa, what are your impressions? Was this your first time seeing it as well?
This was my first time seeing it. I remember when the movie came out, and I remember thinking that I wanted to see it. I knew I haven't read any of the Steve Alton Meg books, but I had heard people talking about them. And this is one of those movies that I feel like people have been trying to make for a while. And so there's been like whispers of different directors attached to it. And for whatever reasons, I mean, I didn't fully go down that rabbit hole on the internet. So I don't know what all happened in the development, but I remember hearing a lot about this movie. And so when it finally was made, I was like, oh, I'd like to go see it. And then I just didn't. I don't know why. I don't know why I never did make it. It probably honestly was not high on my priority list, even though I did want to see it. Yeah, I like you. I was not disappointed. It's the movie that it absolutely advertises itself to be. It's about a giant shark that is terrorizing people. So, Mel, I thought your comparisons to like Godzilla were apt. It's not as serious in nature as the first Godzilla movie, but kind of the later iterations of that kind of like big popcorn flick type of movie where there's just a big giant monster destroying things and hunting down people. It had that feeling to it. Matt, before we hit record, I think you described it as like Jaws in a Fast and Furious world, and that also kind of fits. I feel like if you threw a good shark movie like Jaws and then one of the Godzilla, like probably like 90s, 2000s Godzillas in and added in a little dash of Fast and Furious and blended it all together, that's kind of what this movie is. And like I said, it was exactly what I expected it to be. It did throw some surprises. Looking back, I should have expected those surprises because they were laid out pretty well in the plot. So it's not like the twists were anything that should have been too surprising. But I think I was so caught up in the action of it that I wasn't really looking for them. So it was fun when they happened. And there was a good dose of humor too at times in the movie, which I always appreciate in this kind of film, especially in the Rainn Wilson character. I'm sure we'll talk about his character a little bit, but yeah, I mean, it delivered. It was a giant shark that was hunting down people. It was a monster in your house type of film, and I enjoyed it, and it was fun. I'll probably watch it again if it ever comes on, and I have nothing else to do. So I don't know if I can give it a much higher rating than that, but I liked it.
I guess to get our discussion going, one thing that I kind of jotted down in my notes, I was thinking about as the movie went on, and this is kind of getting away from the action, I guess. But I mean, we can also talk about kind of the stereotype action hero we've got going on here too, because that happens in the prologue. But I feel like in the last two absurd shark movies we watched, I pointed out that when the science aspect is missing or glossed over, the film starts to fall apart because we don't have a reason, even if it's absurd, for the shark being there. And I have to admit, I liked the focus on being with research scientists and doctors for the most part, and all the technobabble that was going on, which some of it was based on real stuff, but obviously adjusted because it's a fictional movie. So I like the idea of going to a research station. I like the idea this was science, but also the billionaire there. So you have capitalism and science, of course, that easy conflict. I liked the debate that was gotten rid of quite quickly so we could get into the action of whether we should kill it or study it or both. So I don't know. I don't know what you guys think of that, but that was something that I kind of appreciated about this movie is I felt like the scientific, I'm putting quotes, framework of the movie I felt like helped it to hold together and keep my attention than the last couple crazy shark movies we watched where the science was dispensed with and we were just spending all our time going, why is this happening? What's going on? I don't need a real reason for why it's happening. I just need some authority figure telling me what's happening.
I yes, I'm glad you brought up the kind of scientific layer of this movie. And I can't believe I'm about to say this, but when you compare it with a movie like Two-Headed Shark, um, there's a couple of things that really stand out in this. Number one, I felt like you could tell that this was a much bigger budget Hollywood film because the shark looks so much better. And when you're dealing with a big shark on screen, you're inevitably only going to see parts of it. And it attacks so quickly that it kind of happens in a blur, which I think is much more effective. Jaws went kind of with that direction where you're only seeing little bits of the shark and it's still just as terrifying because it is almost scarier when you don't see the thing, but it's lurking out there. Whereas Two-Headed Shark just threw up some sort of weird computer animated, like biting shark in the water, which, again, I know they're two completely different types of films, so I'm not going to land on that. But the other thing I did notice was the way the scientists were portrayed. And I thought it helped this film because they did give some explanation as to like why this megalodon was suddenly up and bothering humans when we thought it had gone extinct. I don't know. I don't know the science behind it like you, Mel. I didn't look up the science to know if it could be true. it was plausible enough for the movie, and that was enough for me. If I look at it too hard, it kind of does fall apart, because especially when it was in the really shallow water where the people were swimming at the beach, because I just kept thinking, is that not like a different, like the water would be vastly different from what it was used to. It would be warmer, there'd be more light there. I don't know if the density would be affected of the I don't know if the salt level would be affected, but I was just like, that can't, like, I understand how they were saying it came up through this, like, basically, like, heat pathway that they had accidentally created, but I was like, why is it not, like, why is it staying there? Why is it not getting, like, sick? Or how is it faring so well when it's out of its normal habitat? I don't know. The point is they explained it well enough that I bought it, at least for the time being. And one thing I appreciated in this that I like, and this will be the last thing I say because I'm curious, Matt, what you think about all these kind of sciencey words they threw in. Um, but one thing that I thought was really interesting, they had the scientists who, in these kind of action films, I love it when we saw this when we did our space series a few months ago, is when a scientist sees something really scary in space, they almost don't feel the fear we do. Like, they're more fascinated by what they're seeing, if even if they're in a dangerous situation. And it was the same thing here. Like, when they saw the shark, there was terror, yes, but there was also like this fascination of, we are seeing something that nobody thought was possible. And so there was that, like, desire to learn from it. And kind of like you said, Mel, there was this again fits with a lot of the kaiju type films of, like, just because it's harmful to us doesn't mean we should automatically kill it. Unlike a lot of the kaiju films, though, I thought it was really interesting that they did not really pit the military characters and the scientific characters against each other. I mean, there was a little bit of conflict, but for the most part, that was directed towards, like, Rainn Wilson's character. And the military type character and the scientists were actually trying to work together for the same goal for a lot of the movie, which was kind of interesting.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to circle back around to that in a second, but to answer your first question about the science of the movie, I think, like both of you, I did find it a bit refreshing to have a scientific explanation that still is not plausible, but at least is a lot more plausible than, say, a shark cult using Stonehenge to create sharks in a cornfield, or a six-headed shark that is not explained in any way, shape, or form with massive regeneration abilities. So I agree that the science of it really does fall apart when you actually put it under a magnifying glass, but it is nice to at least have that attempt at an explanation. And I found the idea of the thermocline that separates the bottom of the Marianas Trench from the megalodon's regular climate, I found that to be interesting. I mean, I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's plausible. I think, like you said, Lisa, that the megalodon, having been under there for millions of years, would have probably evolved to adapt to the immense pressure. And so coming up to the surface, I can't imagine that it would be just fine. But I'm not going to ask too many questions. I also I liked that you both mentioned the kaiju-ness or kaiju aspect of the movie, because it really does, I think, like you both have said, have a lot in common with a monster movie, a kaiju movie. This is a massive prehistoric creature, not unlike, say, Godzilla, that gets awoken and it is causing trouble for the humans. And as far as the scientists and the military, like you, Lisa, I was Well, one, I was a bit surprised that there wasn't more military presence in the movie, period. I mean, I get that this is an independent research facility being financed by Rainn Wilson's character. He's a billionaire, so this is not tied to a government entity, but I'm surprised that they didn't seek out the military in some way, shape, or form until towards the end, when it seems more like Rainn Wilson contacted some sort of paramilitary, like mercenaries, like Blackwater or something, rather than the actual US or Chinese military. He claims that he alerted them, but then turns out he didn't. And that's actually something that I kind of wanted to turn to a little bit, because his character's arc is really weird. And it was weird to me because for the first 2/3 of the movie, yes, he's a billionaire, but he's kind of like a billionaire playboy who's there to watch the fruits of his investments, and then he's kind of aghast, but he goes along with them trying to hunt the Meg. He even mentions some advice that helps them try to catch the Meg at one point in the second part of the movie. And then there's this like turnaround where suddenly they find out that he lied about alerting all the governments to its existence. He hasn't told anybody about it. He's hunting the Meg himself. And then, of course, because of his hubris, ends up getting eaten by the giant shark. And it was just really surprising to me, because not like 10 minutes before, he had this really cool, really good speech about how he had come here to celebrate with everyone, and now he's mourning along with them the losses and the deaths of the people that had died. And it was this like, wow, okay, he's kind of an okay character. And then all of a sudden, you find out that he lied about everything and is trying to hunt it himself. And I don't know. I didn't see where that came from. Did I miss something, or is that really a 180 that happened?
No, I don't think you missed anything. His character also confused me. I was just looking through some of my notes, and at first, yeah, he just struck me as this guy who has a ton of money, who invested money in this, and just wants to see, like you said, the fruits of his investment. He seems to be interested in what they're discovering. He's just like, this is cool. I mean, he kind of, there's almost like an excitement to him, like you must be interested in science or something, which I thought was refreshing. And most of the time, as soon as I saw a billionaire who was paying for everything show up and be slightly obnoxious, I was like, oh, this guy's going to be the butt of jokes or absurd or a villain. And I started warming up to him. But then when they realize it's the megalodon, I think it's that point, because they're talking about how long it's supposedly been extinct and how big it is and all of the stuff. He basically just starts listing Toshi, who sacrificed himself, and the sub, and another piece of equipment, something else. And he's like, you all lost my money. Just because you lose an astronaut or you lose a spaceship doesn't mean you stop. It doesn't matter if people died. It's all money. And he talks about how this is a gold mine, and it's just all about the bottom line. And so I wrote in my notes, like, becoming a villain, like it's beating you over the head with it, because he just keeps yelling about gold mine and money all the time. But then as they go on this like Jaws-esque trek to kill the first Meg in the boat, he has these interesting ideas. He's trying to help them. He doesn't just like let anybody die or anything. And then he gives that great speech where all of a sudden, instead of talking about the bottom line and how it's just money, he talks about the people like they're humans and they had sacrificed themselves and whatever. And then when I found out he lied, I wrote again, oh, he's back to being a villain. But he kind of wasn't, because even though he said it was all because of lawsuits, he also said he wanted to erase his mistake himself. But of course, he ends up not able to. And it's almost like absurd at the end of that, because they think they've killed the Meg and they haven't, and the Meg kills him. And so I wasn't sure what they were going for. There were moments of almost like weird dark humor in the portrayal of his character. And then other times he would seem callous and almost villainous. And then all of a sudden he'd be like redeemed again. So yeah, I felt like all of the characters, you pretty much knew who they were and you understood what arc they were going on, if they're going on one at all. But he just seemed to kind of waver back and forth between different things.
I mean, the only thing I can chalk it up to would be the long, long development time that this movie spent in, because like I don't remember which one of you said that, but the rights were purchased back in the late 90s after the first book came out, and the movie didn't actually come out until 2018. So I I wasn't aware of that long development time when I was first watching the movie, but thinking about it afterwards, it does make sense that if the script went through different rewrites, and I know that it had multiple directors attached to it at different times, I guess it makes sense that some of the characters, and his in particular, might be a little bit inconsistent. But it really did just feel like, well, like I said, just these massive 180s back and forth. So, um, anyway, Lisa, did you have any thoughts on Rainn Wilson or anything like that?
Well, this doesn't apply specifically to Rainn Wilson. I mean, maybe it does. Kind of the characters in general. So before we hit record on this, we were kind of talking about our just general thoughts on the movie. And Matt, I think it was you who brought it up that this film has a very clear, like it's very well plotted. It, in fact, you can break it very easily into the three acts of this movie that are like holding it together, complete with like there's a little teaser with the backstory, and then there's Act One, and we've got like a clear mission in Act One where we're all kind of underwater, and then we've got Act Two, and then we've got Act Three with the climax, and we've got to talk about the climax of this movie. Really, because it's something. But the the thing that really struck me about the characters is I had the same thought you did about him when we first meet him. I mean, he's not very likable because he's making comments about, oh, this doesn't look splashy enough, like we need something much more. I mean, he very clearly cares about money, and he cares about being impressive with his money more than he cares about like what's on the surface. And so you kind of expect, just I think as people who have watched movies before, that he's going to be redeemed from that he's going to learn that like image isn't everything. But he doesn't, and it is to a humorous end. Like, I appreciate it. I think part of the reason we wanted him to change, and we kind of felt like he was going to, was less of how the character was written, because I don't think the character was given an arc at all. I don't think any of the characters were really given arcs, but we can talk about that. I think we felt for him when he was giving some of these speeches, like y'all were talking about, because it was Rainn Wilson delivering the lines. And he is an actor who I just really enjoy watching. And so I feel emotions when I'm watching him on screen, maybe more so than we're meant to be there. But I was even thinking about like Jason Statham he plays, and I can't even remember his name in this movie. Like the whole time I was watching it, in my head, it was just Jason Statham versus the shark. But even his character, he's the military guy. He's obviously the hero, the protagonist. He's the person we're following. He doesn't even get much of a redemption arc, because even though he has been labeled as like unstable or mentally ill throughout the movie, and I guess his arc is that people respect him now by the end, or like don't think that. But in the beginning, he's struggling with these feelings of, you have to sometimes sacrifice a person to save everybody else. And sometimes, and he even has a line that it's like, it's not who you lose in these things, it's the people that you end up saving. So there's this whole like heroic, sometimes courage takes sacrifice type of narrative. But he doesn't change from that at all over the course of it, because in the end, he's like, I mean, he's willing to sacrifice himself, which he doesn't because he's Jason Statham. But it's not like he learns anything. That there, in other words, there was no arc. Like, I thought it was set up that, oh, he's going to learn that like everybody's life is just as important, and so you can't sacrifice one to save everybody. But that's not really where we land. His values are still the same at the beginning of the movie as they are at the end. It's just now people aren't labeling him as unstable anymore for doing the things. Like, none of the characters have arcs. It is a purely plot movie, right?
No, you're not wrong. There is no real arc at all for anyone. And I even actually had a note to myself, well, not to myself, but in my notes while watching the movie, that there's only really one person that distrusts Jason Statham, and that's Dr. Heller, who was on that submarine where he had to make that choice to sacrifice some of his friends so that everyone else could live. And he's the one that diagnoses him with pressure psychosis or pressure induced psychosis, whatever it was that he called it. But even the other people, the doctor and Mac, and they're all basically like rushing to defend him when they're trying to bring him on board, even though they know that he's a washed up drunk. And but like, it's clear they don't believe that, because he was saying that, something hit the submarine. It's implied as the megalodon. They, even at that point, they agree with him and are kind of defending him. So I mean, it's almost like he doesn't even have to prove himself to them, because they already agree with him, at least mostly. And yeah, he has no real arc. The love interest, who is also the doctor's daughter, who is also a doctor herself, she has no real arc, except that she gets rescued and also helps kill the Meg. I mean, really, none of the characters have any arcs. It's just kind of like you said, it's just kind of a flat line, and here's a bunch of stuff happening to people. So hope you like these characters, because none of them are changing.
Yeah, I think anything that happens is all in service of the plot, which maybe also explains some of the absurdity of the billionaire. Is he's just acting in the way that he needs to for each part, basically. But yeah, I mean, I think I don't really know that we have to talk much more about character, but I think I had mentioned something about how they're kind of like types in the beginning, and I felt like the Jason State, like I didn't know anything about this movie, and I was not surprised at how it began. I was not surprised that people didn't trust him and were angry that he left people behind, which they would have all died had he gone back, most likely. I was not surprised that he became a washed up drunk, like I could have predicted that very easily, and that by the end of the movie, he's not supposed to be that anymore because I guess he has purpose or something because he fell in love with the person that the writers told him he was supposed to. So yes, I think Matt, what you said about all these people are their thing that they have to be to make the story work, and the things that they do and the choices that they make are things to make the plot work, because you have to get to what Lisa mentioned earlier, which is all the action of them fighting with this shark, this implausible shark.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm so glad that you mentioned the washed up drunk part, because I actually made a note about that, where like my first note is, the washed up drunk trope, because that's exactly what he is. He's a washed up drunk. But I even loved how they didn't even really develop that much, because when they show up to convince him, he has this whole speech about, like, he's opening beers for them, and he's like, you're going to tell me you need me, and I'm going to tell you no. You're going to offer me money, and I'm going to tell you no. You're going to say this, and I'm going to tell you no. So let's just sit down, have a couple of beers, and guys can be on your way. And then immediately, like, they play him the sound of Lori, and he doesn't even have to say he's on board. Scene cuts, and he's arriving on this the it's not a space station. I don't know what the word for it is. The underwater station. And it was like, oh, they didn't even have to do any more convincing than it's your ex-wife down there, who it's really unclear who she is. I had to look that up to begin with. But yeah, like, it's just, this is all to get him there so he can start saving people. Why are you questioning this? We need more action.
Yes, as soon as they played the recording and then he decided to go, I think I might have actually said out loud, it's like they believe him. Like the only two reasons that he showed, well, I guess there's three reasons. Yours is they needed him to show up to rescue people, it's his ex-wife, but I guess that means something, though, like you said, it's not built up or explained. And then third, I felt like it was like his whole reason he's a washed up drunk is that people didn't believe him. And the only reason we know he's a washed up drunk is because we see him slumped over with beers in his hands all the time. That's not even like explained or worked up. But I felt like, again, this goes to his stereotype of a character. When he hears this recording, it's like, oh, well, now it's true. It's real. Like, I'm going to go back and be, I could go back and do my thing because my ex-wife who didn't believe me says that I was right. And these people who thought I was crazy say that I'm right. So yeah, I mean, it's not redemption is like not the word at all. It's like way too strong of a word. Maybe that's what they were going for, but it's like, we need this guy to go save these people. And his character is that he's obsessed with the fact that people don't believe him. So if we play for him something that shows that now we believe him, he's automatically going to throw his knapsack on and go rescue everybody. So I just felt like it was so simplistic, but it had to be that way for the movie to work. So yeah, you don't want to think too hard about it or you lose the fun of it.
I mean, Mel, you mentioned it being simplistic, and really, this is what it comes down to. People are on a boat, or I guess a submarine. They're underwater. They're in an underwater research something. I don't know. There are people underwater. They see a shark. They're like, that shark is so big, we can't handle it. Then they say that shark is so big, we need somebody who is crazy enough to handle it. And I only know one crazy enough person to do this job. Jason Statham walks in, shows up, and then the whole movie is set into motion. You're right at that point of, here's the one guy who's crazy enough to make this plan work. And that's the part of it. I feel like, and this is where the movie, I think, in my opinion, succeeds extremely well, is in the climax of the film, because that's the plot. The plot is, we need a guy crazy enough to take down this big crazy shark. And so they bring him in, and I don't even know if I can explain to those of you who have not seen this movie, but the climax, I'm going to do my best. The shark, they think they killed the shark, but there's a surprise. There's a second megalodon, which I don't know how they would miss that, but they did. The world's biggest apex predator, and they've missed it, that there was two of them. That was a fun twist, but now the second one is like out in the world, and it's going for a crowded beach. They managed to lure it away. They try to dangle some bait. It almost eats the shark cage or whatever. It succeeds in like tipping over the boat. They get rescued. Rainn Wilson blows up a whale by accident, and then he gets eaten. And now they've got to go after. I may have gotten some of those out of order, but I don't care. It doesn't affect the movie. Anyway, it ends up being where they're going to go down and try to take down this shark once and for all. And they have these little like submarine type cars. I don't know what they are. They really look, if anybody has kids or has watched Octonauts, it reminded me of the little cartoon like submarine vessel that they go around in the cartoon. I was laughing the whole time I was watching that. But basically they try to make the shark mad, or they succeed, I guess, in making the shark mad as they're trying to kill it. And so it's going after them, and it's chomping up Jason Statham, and he realizes at one point that it's gonna like hurt his crew, who I can't even remember how, but they end up in the water somehow. There's a lot in this movie where people go over the side of boats, by the way. I mean, people are constantly getting knocked off of boats, or anyway, I guess it makes sense for a shark movie. But Jason Statham somehow gets out of his submarine and manages to go one-on-one with a shark in the water just him and this apparently unkillable behemoth with a knife and a spear, and that's it. I mean, this is the climax of the movie, is Jason Statham swimming around this megalodon, stabbing at it with a knife, and I don't know what else I expected, but guys, this movie delivered, right? It delivered Jason Statham killing a mega shark. I have to know your thoughts on the climax.
Well, I was kind of like, of course. Because what else could happen at this moment? And yeah, I mean, he anchors himself to the shark's head with his knife, which I don't know how it would hold you into a megalodon shark's head. But whatever, there's no logic. It jumps out of the water and he somehow hangs on the whole way, meanwhile stabbing the spear through the shark's eye, which, okay, I guess that's a vulnerable spot. But I found myself wondering, if a megalodon is that big, is his spear going through the eye actually going to do enough damage to the brain or ever to kill it? Like, I was kind of surprised that that was what it took to kill it. They had to poison and like chop at the other one to kill it. So I don't know. I feel like something that big, that's great. I guess you'd make it mad, but I'm not 100% sure that stabbing it through the eyeball would kill it. I thought it was awesome, and you get your money's worth. But afterward, when I was thinking about it, I was like, like, yeah, that's just, I don't know about that. It was like earlier when he managed to get away from the previous one, and the shark decided not to eat that ship, but it ate every other ship in the movie. It's like, certain things have to happen to make the plot go. But as for like, this is a summer blockbuster, it was awesome. I still wondered if maybe the shark was gonna like come back to life or something, because I wasn't sure how that would kill it, but it was pretty cool. Oh, I take that back. He did also use the broken submarine to tear its stomach open. So maybe those two things together would be enough to kill it.
Well, and I guess that did bring, like, all the blood in the water brought
Brought all
all
the other
the
sharks.
smaller
Yeah.
sharks.
Yeah.
That that was kind of a cool image, was watching that. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, it was it. Yeah, I don't know what else I expected.
I mean, it was the way the movie had to end, I feel like. Like, I feel like they had that ending before they ever started it.
No, that ending should have involved a massive explosion, as I believe we determined on our last mini episode about two-headed shark. That's the law of shark movies, is that there has to be an explosion.
There was
That's my thought.
there was the explosion of the random journalist helicopters crashing into their boat. Um, but it wasn't at the
Not big
very, very
enough,
end.
not nearly explosive enough. No,
Well,
I do. I mean, I do agree that yes, Jason Statham going mano a mano with a 75-foot shark is kind of the epitome of this movie. And I will return to that phrase that this is Jaws in a post Fast and Furious world, because, I mean, look at Jason Statham's resume, and yeah.
well, apparently, and again, I have not read the novel of this, but apparently, looking at the summary that I just found online, the it did end with the military guy Jonas navigating the basically the little submarine thing down the throat and stomach, and then he escapes from his pod. It doesn't say anything about the main character like going after the shark with the knife. But now I'm really curious, because I mean that is pretty close to what we got. So now I'm wondering, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I will actually read the novel version of Meg, but now I'm curious to know how much of the Jason Stathamness of this movie was originally in the novel, because just looking at it, it seems like it follows it pretty closely. It follows the plot pretty closely. I don't know. But that ending, I'm surprised that that ending was not dreamed up by, as you said, Matt, the kind of post Fast and the Furious writers. Apparently, a lot of that was in the original 1997 book. So now I'm curious.
You know, something I'm curious about is the Marianas Trench big enough to have held multiple megalodons for millions of years? Wouldn't these things have not had enough food down there to eat and popped up and bothered us before this?
Mel, you're asking real questions and you're looking too closely at this movie. You need to step back, appreciate it for what it is.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
But you're
don't pull
absolutely
at that
right.
thread.
Well, thank you for, supporting my crazy questions. Because yeah, that was bothering me throughout the whole movie. I was like, part of me was like, this is cool. I like this premise. This is fun. And then another part of me was like, I don't think, like you said, Lisa, with the pressure concern. So I just have to try not to think about those things and just remember Jason Statham and his knife.
Well, Mel, and I had wanted to bring this up earlier, but then the conversation moved away from it. But when we were discussing the one-dimensionalness of the characters, Jason Statham is referred to. Well, they say there's only 3 people who've ever attempted a rescue below 10,000 feet, and only one of them is alive to tell it. Whoo, it's Jason Statham. Surprise. We're forgetting that his soon-to-be love interest takes one of the divers and manages to get down just as deep as he went with no issues. And so it's one of those things that, again, if you look too closely at it, well, I mean, yeah, it's gonna fall apart. So you just kind of have to ride the ride and not look too much at the scenery, as it were.
Well, speaking of that ride, we are going to get to experience the ride again, because the Meg 2, The Trench, has been announced for, it's still saying next year. I'm not sure if they filmed it or if it was just, I mean, it's been announced. It has a release date of August 4th, 2023, and it does again star Jason Statham. So I guess we're going to go down in the trench and figure out just how many megalodons have been hiding out there, which will be kind of fun. And I, when I looked at the director attached is Ben Wheatley, who he's done a couple of horror movies that I've heard a lot of, people talking about, A Field in England and In the Earth. So, oh, this says it's in post production, so I guess it has filmed and it's getting ready to go. But we'll get some more Jason Statham. My guess is if you're in the Mariana Trench, he can't really get out of the, I wouldn't think he'd be able to get out and swim around in that, even if you did have his fancy little mouth thingy helping you breathe. I don't know. It'll be curious. Well, I don't know. Maybe that is a good place to start, since we've made it all the way to the sequel of the Meg. I have to say, guys, I don't want to say I'm super excited, but maybe I'm a little bit excited to see the Meg too. If it delivers on it the way this one did, then it could be kind of a fun summer movie to watch. You know what? If you're excited about it, or if you liked the Meg, we'd love to hear from you. Or if you have any recommendations for another shark movie that we can tackle, we've got a few more episodes, I think, in this series that we can pull out. So let us know. We're at No Fear Cast on Twitter and Instagram. We also have a Facebook page. If you want to check us out on the web, you can also go to our website, www.nofearcast.com. There is some very nice commissioned artwork that you can buy some merchandise there and see some of the some of the great work that we were able to commission from Lynn Hansen. So we're really excited about that. Our email is novyourcast@gmail.com. If you love what we're doing, consider supporting us on Patreon. You'll get access to exclusive content. We have been talking about other shark films on that one, including Two-Headed Shark. There's been some rumors that Sand Shark might make an appearance over on the Patreon. So if that sounds like something you'd like, maybe check us out there. Of course, we understand if that is not in the financial plans for you, because things are hard for a lot of us. But if that's the case, consider rating and reviewing us on whatever podcast listening streamer you use. That is entirely free for you, but it does help us out immensely, and we always appreciate that. Theme music is by Nicholas Gasparini. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new and possibly toothier episode.